May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest. Oh, but before I tell you who the guest is, I want to say in the introduction, Jay, you notice how I say Shunryu? That's really not right. It's Shunryu. There's some words I learned to say before I started studying Japanese, and I pretty much still say them that way. It's not Shunryu, it's Shunryu. And that RYU is, you throw a little D in on it. Their R is in the front of the mouth, so we can't really say an RYU, Ryu, but they're saying more like do. But I'm not saying anymore, or I'm trying not to say preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his and anything else that comes to mind. I like to say, doing our bit to help, because I started thinking, well, there's all sorts of other people doing this and have done that and will do this, and I don't want to give the impression that we think we're the only game in town. So I'm going to start modifying that. But I will not go back to the 600 prior podcasts or whatever there are and correct it. So they're just, they've been corrected now. So our guest is Ken Spiker. Ken's a very interesting fellow. He was early on around Zen Center, and mainly came for lecture from Berkeley, and he was really close with some of the more far out of the crowd, but he himself wasn't, and it's very interesting. Like he was close with Diane DePrima. I mean, that was as counterculture as you could get. Oh yeah, I was involved with them too, and Loring Palmer and other people, and anyway, but he's just a really down to earth guy, really, very. Anyway, enough of that. So I call him up and we talk. And we get into that stuff some, but a lot of what we do is we talk about, what is he up to now and what's it like there in Mendocino and so forth. And, that is one of the things I want to do with these podcasts. It's not like, I'm not trying to make inspiring Dharma podcasts that you can come to and get enlightened or something. They're really not necessarily. They're not aimed at really helping anyone along the path. People do that on their own, but it's the whole idea of a big giving the picture of what happened to all these people that passed through Zen Center back then. Like back then, there were, if you look at some of the groups, like Yasutani was doing all these sessions, and people would have Kensho experience, and they say, oh, so-and-so got enlightened. I wonder how much follow-up there's been on any of that. What happened to those people? And, anyway, so I like doing this, and I want to keep doing it. I'm just doing it, once a week now because I've got to get other stuff done in that 6 days a week, although there was only 1 or 2 a week that would be guests. After a while, I thought, well, I don't really have to do that anymore. So anyway, let's I was going to say let's call him up, but I think beforehand, I would like to read to you some of his stories about Shunryu Suzuki, because like early on when I started Cute.com, I guess, and there was some sort of outreach. I don't think he got hold of me before that. I don't know. But early on, he was sending me these wonderful stories. And he sent me other stuff, like looking at his page on Cute.com now, which I did not refer to before I called him up. I see there's, if you know, just write Ken Spiker, KenSpiker in the site search box on the homepage of Cute.com. And if that gives you trouble, go to another page to write it or hit the link for search. Sometimes things screw up for me because I use the website to, get around and look things up too. Same as you. Anyway, there's stories about Shunryu Suzuki. There's on Richard Sassoon. Now that's very interesting. There's on Philip Wilson. And it says, we have Ken to thank for saving this very early 4-page version of the Heart Sutra chanted at Sokoji. Now, when I came to Sokoji in, the San Francisco Zen Center in 1966, we had a 2-page version. That's to say, 1 leaf. In other words, one sheet of heavy paper with the Heart Sutra printed on both sides in the characters, the Chinese characters, the which are Japanese kanji, but I think actually they used a Chinese printer. I remember hearing that, so on both sides, with the literal English that Suzuki put in there himself, in which Allen Ginsberg chanted, and the Romaji, which is what we chanted, Ganji Zaibo, Kanji Zaibo, Hatsugo Jinanya, Harabi Jijo. Anyway, originally it was 4 pages, two sheets, 4 sides. And it's interesting because it doesn't look too crowded on the 1 sheet, 2 sides. But that's on Cute.com. There's a nice link to it here on this page. Then there's a little thing he wrote called Comments on a Cult and Trungpa's Group, which is rather interesting. And then, I wish I'd asked him about this. We talked about doing this again in half a year or something. On page 9 of the fall 1968 Windbell, we see that Ken Spiker played shakuhachi at Richard and Virginia Baker's going-away party to Japan that I, DC, helped to put together with Jeannie Campbell. That's interesting. So, Ken, we met back then. We're trying to. Oh yeah, I asked him if we'd ever met, and he said at a book signing and a book reading I did up in Mendocino years ago. But I would imagine we met then too, or passed each other. That's cool. And hey, Ken, I want to know how you ended up there. And all that, because I didn't know you back then. But anyway, all right. So I'm going to read you stories about Shunryu Suzuki. I won't read all of them. I'll just get into it. So he says, this he wrote in 2000. So maybe that's when we first got contact. It says 1/13/2000. Oh, so that's exactly 23 years ago. Well, not exactly. It was 23 years and 12 days ago or something. Right now, I think tonight is here in Bali is, I don't know if they actually how they say it. But and this is Bulan Tillim. Bulan is month or moon, and Tillim is the new moon, right? Isn't that what we call the moon when it's like the opposite of the full moon? And, my lead guitarist in the Bali Yuga little band we have here, his professional name is Gus Tillim, but his name is Gus Sateja. But I noticed at the recording studio they call him Gus Tillim, and that was a name. The last names here aren't family names. Everybody's got a different one. But he's got like two. I don't quite understand, but he's called Gus Tillim. Tillim is the new moon. He was born on the new moon. So anyway, now it's going to get lighter and lighter in the evening. All right, so anyway, he writes me. He's introducing himself. He says, I always thought of the Zen Center as my spiritual home, though I wasn't really ready to face the prospect of hard practice. I first became interested in Buddhism and Eastern religions by hearing Alan Watts on KPFA. Boy, you and a zillion other people. I began visiting the Zen Center around 1965 and often went to Zazen on the Wednesday night lectures by Suzuki Roshi. When I became interested in the Zen Center, we called him Reverend Suzuki. My friend Loring Palmer became a serious Zenny and lived near the Zen Center, but I lived in Berkeley, and Zazen seemed awfully hard on my legs. Was enlightenment worth all the leg pain and discomfort? I did tend to think about it on those terms then, but I had no doubt that Suzuki was the real thing. He seemed to radiate enlightenment. To me, many of the Zen students appeared rigid and masochistic, sitting ramrod straight and unmoving, even in less formal circumstances such as the lectures. But Suzuki himself appeared to possess a remarkable lightness of being and sense of humor. There was nothing rigid or formalistic about him. I attended many of the Wednesday night lectures and hung on every word. If I couldn't do a rigorous Zazen schedule, at least I might obtain some slight degree of insight from listening to him speak. I remember a number of his quotations and especially some of the responses to questions from the audience. Seeing him in person completely changed my understanding of what Zen was about. And here is a quote. If you're not a Buddhist, you think there are Buddhists and non-Buddhists. But if you're a Buddhist, you realize everybody's a Buddhist, even the bugs. Then Ken writes, someone at a lecture asked him about psychoanalysis. He said, you think the mind is like a pond and you throw things in and they sink to the bottom, like old shoes and things, and later they rise to the surface. But actually, there's no such thing as the mind. And then Ken writes, at one of the lectures, he got up and told how he'd been invited to the Jewish Community Center to talk about Zen. They asked me all kind of questions. When you talk about reality, do you mean phenomena or noumena behind the phenomena? I didn't know how to answer. Suzuki laughed as if it was the biggest joke he'd ever heard. I just had to tell them that that is not our way. A young student, Ken writes, I can't remember his name, was heavily into the hippie lifestyle, but at the same time was a serious sitter. Suzuki came to him one day and said, you smoke too much marijuana. Okay, the fellow said, I'll quit. You're the boss. Suzuki said, no, you're the boss. Ken writes, I noticed he never answered a question in the abstract. He always addressed the person who asked the question. Someone asked, "You say that Zen is everywhere. Why do we have to come to the Zen Center?" And he answered, "Zen is everywhere, but for you, Zen is right here." Hey, thanks, Ken. That's we've got a book named after that one. Zen is right here. And now the companion, Zen is right now. And that's all because of you. And Suzuki and that student. And then I once asked him why anybody would do Zazen if they didn't have a gaining idea. He said, "You still have one gaining idea. What is that?" I wanted to know. He replied, "That's a secret." And he writes, when someone asked him about LSD, all he said was, "Enlightenment is not a state of mind." So Ken writes, "I remember one night when Trungpa spoke. As I remember, it was in the Zendo, but it might have been somewhere else. Yeah, it was probably in the Buddha Hall upstairs at the city center. Suzuki introduced him. Trungpa proceeded to work his way through a six-pack of Colt 45 tall cans while he spoke." Good Lord, really? I never saw that. Wow. Pardon me. Suzuki sat off to the side, bemused. Obviously, he approved of Trungpa. How a person who drank all the time be enlightened? I couldn't figure it out, and I still can't. I suppose it's a go-on for me, but Trungpa's talk was funny, and it seemed to me wildly perceptive. One item stands out in my mind. Trungpa said, "Everybody wants to be a Buddha. Nobody wants to be a sentient being." And he writes, "I was very pleased to read in your book that Suzuki defended Alan Watts. Alan Watts has always been a hero to me, but he never seemed really enlightened, and he never said he was. I never knew him to be wrong about anything he said about Hinduism, Taoism, or Buddhism." And then it says here, "I wrote Ken back and got this answer from him. I wish I had more stories of Suzuki Roshi, but those are the ones that stick in my mind. I remember a couple of other one-liners. The first, I can't remember now whether I heard Suzuki say it or somebody else reported it to me. Somebody asked Suzuki about various Hindu spiritual practices, and Suzuki said, 'Must be very hot in India, lots of deliriums.'" I've forgotten about that one. At a lecture, somebody asked him what he thought of Gurdjieff. He said, "In Buddhism, we don't have spiritual heroes." That's very interesting. That's very interesting, huh? I mean, is Gurdjieff any more of a spiritual hero than Suzuki? I mean, that's interesting. That shows his take on that, huh? I'm enjoying this. I wasn't planning on reading it all, but anyway. I remember riding with Loring Palmer on the Fillmore bus one day when Suzuki got on wearing his little pillbox hat, and he smiled and waved at us. Of course, these are just snapshots. This is interesting. Maybe I met you at Loring's, gang, because I used to live with Loring, but that was just, like probably November of 66 till I moved to Tassa, or maybe even December in March of 67. But Loring had, a number of people came over there, especially to buy his what he sold. And Ken says, "I have a lot of recollections from the 60s. I met Alan Watts when I was working at KPFA. Wow, you worked there. That's cool. A very exciting time. I remember meeting Richard Baker and Philip Wilson. I used to watch Phil Wilson at Zazen to see how he did it because he'd been to AAG. I may very well have met you. but I'm not sure now. I do remember Eric Storley. Well, Eric was very close with Loring. I mean, they were both from Minneapolis. I corresponded with Loring Palmer in the 70s and 80s. We had some rather intense exchanges by letter about whether Trungpa was good for Buddhism. One evening in Boulder in the early 80s, he got me wonderfully drunk on a variety of imported beers. Yes, visiting Loring in Boulder was great because in the early 80s, he was like at the desk of the Boulderado Hotel. Am I saying that right? Boulderado Hotel. And people would gather in front, Trungpa students. And that's interesting because he'd say he got you wonderfully drunk. Loring was not much of a drinker. I mean, he would drink. He introduced me to Anchor Steam Beer. He took me out to the Anchor Steam Beer Brewery in San Francisco, and they had this giant wooden barrel. I mean, really, like 20 feet in diameter, and it had a spigot on it. I mean, this is the way I remember it. And you could go drink beer there for free, and people did. But Loring wasn't. He wasn't indulgent. He was, you know, like you say. I think you say in our podcast here, he was a serious person. He was, and he was very understanding and accepting of everybody. Wonderful person. Anyway. And a true believer in all sorts of stuff. So, Ken then concludes, thank you again for your book. I can't tell you how moved I was to read it. Well, thank you. I am also glad to hear that Suzuki suffered from forgetfulness, something that has always plagued me. I really knew nothing about Suzuki Roshi's life before the Zen Center. He seemed to have appeared out of nowhere from another dimension. I remember when bowing to him after Zazen, I noticed his pinky was bent. Actually, it wasn't his pinky, it's his fourth finger, I think, on the right hand. Is this a stylistic thing they do in Japan? I wondered. Then I found out from the book that it had been squashed by a rock. That's right. Okay. So, look, thanks for letting me read you that. Now let's give Ken Spike. Hey, Ken, write more. I like the way you write. Maybe you can pull something out. But you've got some pretty nice stuff here. Okay, so let's give him a call, huh? And see what he and I have to say to each other. So when you hear the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause. And we'll meditate or whatever you want for as long as you want. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And then we'll hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever and give Ken Spiker a call. Or that's what we're pretending anyway.
Well,
There you are.
it's an app I haven't used.
Hey, this is very cool. You look great. You are a floating head with a black background. It's very
Yes,
cool.
I know. Well, we tried different lighting in this room, and then somehow the overhead light, uh, washed out the room, and then the faces were in darkness. So I decided to try using the light from the computer as the light,
That's
and
enough.
you know, But I
Yeah.
didn't mean. I guess I appear like Zardoz or something. It's
Yeah.
it's some
Yeah.
kind of disembodied spirit. You
Yeah.
called me up, so here I am. You would evoked me from the underworld.
Yeah. Right. Right. Indeed. Indeed. So, um, Ken, Ken Spiker, um, have we ever met?
Yes, you were in Mendocino. I think you did a presentation. Maybe at the Mendocino Zen Center. I don't remember exactly where, but I know I came to your lecture or your. I
Oh,
guess you.
really?
Yeah, yeah. And I read your books, and I contributed to one of your books.
Oh, you sure did. Your memories of Suzuki Roshi are they're really good, and a number of them are in those little books. Zen is right here, and Zen is right now. Um, and I suppose in Crooked Cucumber too. I can't remember. Um, anyway, yeah, you have a good memory for highlights that are interesting. Not
Yeah,
everybody does.
yeah. Well, of
Uh,
course, that's human memory works that way. It's like if there's something that has an emotional response.
yeah,
And I suppose it could be intellectual too,
yeah,
because like in those days we were uh, we were all following Suzuki. I lived in
yeah.
Berkeley, and I lived in a communal house with a bunch of weirdos and artists, and and
Anybody I know?
and with characters like Daniel Moore and Richard Sassoon. And I mean,
Oh, wow.
we shared a house, Richard, and other crazy artists, and people would go. We would go to lectures by Suzuki, and then we come back, and then we tell everybody what he'd said. It was like his quote,
Uh,
and I remember some of his quotes. And uh, but and I don't. I think what you published in Crooked Cucumber was about what I remember, and a lot of those quotes, because we shared them. I'm not sure that I witnessed them in person.
I
Some of
do
them,
understand.
yeah, but
Same with me. I hear so many stories. After a while, I don't know what I experienced and what other people did.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
it was tremendously influential. It just took a long time, and I'm glad I'm still preserved, because I'm like, the bull, the 10 bulls.
Yeah.
They see, like I'm in about the first or second stage there, like I cited the bull, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. The,
and
the,
you know,
yeah.
and the rest. I mean, there's our lives, and our opinions. I think people's opinions, about life and so on, are very superficial. What gets them
Hmm.
is what gets them emotionally, and connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I get older, I get less and less interested because it's not that I'm withdrawing from life, but at this age, you see the repetitions.
Yeah.
Everything comes around. They're
Yeah.
like there's a like in politics, there's a everybody gets excited about something, and everybody gets you know well uh, and I mean there's certain themes keep coming back, but it's just like a play. The play goes on for generations, and only the actors change.
What are you up to these days? Where do you live, and what are you up to? You seem to be pretty active.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of retired, I'm an introvert, so I like being alone. I'll tell you that the pandemic was great for me and my partner Phoebe. I have a Phoebe, and she's very smart, and uh, maybe I'll have her come in and meet you in a minute.
Oh yeah,
Uh, yeah.
sure.
Anyway, I like the pandemic was we just wrote it out because we're both introverts. We kind of like to stay at home, and we have a couple of acres here, and it's very peaceful and
Where are you?
quiet. It's in Mendocino.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I knew you were
near
up north.
you
Yeah,
know
and
where
you did mention Mendocino a little bit ago, right?
Jackson State Forest. Well,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
that's that's the big forest in Mendocino County. Well, of course, it extends inland miles and miles. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's more forest even farther to the east, except that if you
Mm.
go too far east and get up in the mountains there, then you'll find that they're taken over by marijuana growers, who are not, they're not the gentle hippies we used to know. They're like Mexican drug cartels and so on.
That makes
So,
hiking dangerous,
yeah,
or
right. Well,
especially
around
it
here,
used to.
yeah, I know. Anyway, not around here. I mean, in our immediate area.
Mm-hmm.
And you will find personal gardens sometimes, but not the big growers. They're more inland.
Mm.
Anyway, it's. I mean, I don't understand why it's. I mean, they did a big. They screwed up in California because they're going to legalize pot and make it, like make it. The California government would regulate it, and collect taxes. I mean, it's a great source of revenue. I mean, there's millions of dollars floating around. But the
Yeah.
trouble is that they made the rules, and so the growers that were signed up, for the as official growers, they had to pay money. They had to pay taxes on all their stuff, and the growers that didn't sign up, the guys that were just growing it, and had been growing it and everything, they didn't need to sign up because there was no penalty for not signing up. It's like the revenuers and like uh, the stills in the South, and it
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it took federal enforcement to like the revenuers to go and uh, you know tear down the stills because the states wouldn't do it. The people were making money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of money being made, and there's a lot of big money coming in, and there's a lot of, really shady deals. In other words, they decriminalized it, but the criminals are still running it.
Ah, that's very interesting.
And
Mm.
because and meanwhile the tobacco companies I think are trying to get in on it too. So there'll be, in other words, whereas the Mendocino hippies used to think, well, we have this little garden and we're just out there getting high and making money, and we're not hurting anybody. And it was a lifestyle. They even made movies about it. It's real.
Yeah.
You just get stoned and go out with your plants and, kind of hide it because the camp, which was the
Oh,
federal,
yeah.
would come over, and I guess they're still doing stuff like that, but not much. Anyway, I'm not an expert on this subject. I
Yeah.
just that we're kind of like in one of the centers of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, where we are, there's no. See, I don't understand. Well, I do understand. It's crazy, but I mean, alcohol is worse. I mean,
You
alcohol
bet.
is a serious. I mean, it's a debilitating drug, and it
I
causes
agree.
enormous harm. And
Yeah, and it's associated with
and
violence.
yet, yeah, exactly. And auto accidents, it's like there's this guy from, well, I mean, there's millions of cases, but there was a guy in the Zen Center when I was going there, and who was a young student and very, very, I mean, he was a lot more into it than I was. And he got killed on the Bay Bridge by a drunk driver.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that right? What year was that?
I wouldn't know. I think it was in the 70s. It was Suzuki was still around, so I'm not sure.
Well, Suzuki died in 71. Your
Yeah, so
stories
then it would
go
have been
back
before.
to mid 60s.
The guy's name was Green, and I can't remember his first name, but he was a friend of Laurie. His last name was Green. He was.
Loring never mentioned that to me. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. I'm sorry.
Well, Loring is. I was good friends with Loring. We were buddies, and
I
Loring.
know.
Loring came from a. He was, I think, raised in a sort of Swedish Lutheran. I'm not sure exactly what the name of it, and his brother, up there in Minnesota, and that's a kind of severe kind of Protestantism. So I think he
Oh,
brought that into Zen.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You
Are
knew
you
his brother
still?
too?
I mean, I can hear you. I think you're, well, I don't know if you're frozen or not. Sometimes you don't move around a lot.
Uh,
Anyway, are you
yeah.
reading me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, I was just saying, Loring was, he was a psychedelic ranger when he came out here. And, and we were dropping acid. And he was very serious, though, about a spiritual path. And we weren't just hedonists, we were, like, it's sort of like psychotherapy would have been one answer, but no, it was too expensive. It just wasn't available. It really, people went to Zen because they couldn't afford psychotherapy, I think. Anyway, Loring was very, very serious, about it. He's very serious about his acid trips. We used
Yeah.
to drop acid. I remember one night we went into some place in, I don't think it was called Williams College. It was up on, I don't know if it was Euclid Street, one of those streets that went up into the hills, and it was a large frame building which had been used as some kind of academic site. Anyway, I just remember this acid trip and Loring Loring stayed there, and I went down to get some supplies, some food at the
Mm-hmm.
local Pack and Pay or whatever it was called, and I drove all the way down. I was, out of really stoned on acid. But Loring stayed there. I went to this place, and there was this, one of those convenience stores. It's all lit up, neon and everything, and to get supplies
Yeah.
for and everything. I mean, it was weird driving on acid. It's insane, of course, but actually, I did very well. And
Yeah.
I went down there with this girl who I'm not sure who it was now. It's the way memory works, but I remember meeting a guy in the store, you know, and of course here I am, there's a lot of colors and lights flashing, and I'm kind of drifting around like I'm a disembodied spirit. And this guy comes up to me, and I knew from Telegraph Avenue, and he says, uh, "Do I look strange to you?" One of the guys I used to see around. And I said, you know, "Well, no, you're perfectly normal." And of course, he's like, sort of like fading in and out, and the colors are going all over his face and everything.
Yeah.
And he says, he gets up close to me and he says, "I'm on acid." He wanted me to tell him that he looked normal.
That's great.
Anyway, I'm just saying that, and of course, I'd go up there, and Loring would, I think this time he'd take LSD, and he takes, was some kind of, something like Robitussin. It's a cough medicine.
No, he'd
You're
take
supposed to,
Romalar. Romalar.
well, maybe that was it.
Yeah, it
Anyway,
was like a strangely uh, psychedelic type cough
yeah.
medicine. Dextromethorphan hydrobromide was the drug in it.
And then in the morning, he kind of unwound himself from his lotus posture, and said, I said, "How was it?" And he said, "I didn't get the colors so good this time."
No, you shouldn't take with acid. You should not take Romalar. Romalar distorts everything. It's very
I know,
strange.
I know, but this was really before Suzuki, and uh,
Oh, mm-hmm.
and then I guess he, uh, I don't know who went there first, or we went together, I suppose. And he was hooked on Zen, and he was very, you know him. He was one of those guys that just can sit in lotus posture, for sessions and all day. And he had a very good, what they call a very good seat, a very good, you know, he was a very good
Mm-hmm.
sitter. I thought he was very literal minded. He was, like, uh, he'd, he also was on this special diet. I mean, he was ascetic. And I think it had to do with being something like a Swedish Lutheran, but
Uh-huh.
he was, he was not just
Macrobiotic.
going. Yeah, he was on macrobiotic,
Yeah.
and macrobiotic is, they called it the Zen macrobiotic
Yeah.
diet, but it didn't have
Yeah.
anything to do with Zen, except Zen monks didn't eat very well often. They ate a lot of rice, and and his brother was on it too. I'd hang out at his house in San Francisco, and they'd be sitting rigidly at their table, with these Japanese chopsticks, which I never learned to use. I don't have any trouble with Chinese chopsticks, but the Japanese, a little hard to pick up those grains of rice. Uh, and he'd sit there, they'd be very quiet, and they had they'd say a Zen prayer. Uh, it was a great prayer too. I mean, this is one that they did at the Zen Center, which is, "We are thankful for this food, which is the product of the work of other beings and the sufferings of other forms of life."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and they'd sit very kind of rigid and eat this with their little chopsticks, and be very quiet at the table. So he was really
Mm.
into it, except I thought he was too literal minded. There's something about Zen requires a kind of, that's my opinion. I think he
I
was,
agree with you. I agree with you. Uh, yeah, that manifested itself with Loring. You and I both stayed in touch with Loring until he died. That manifested itself with him his whole life.
Yeah.
In the ideas and the people he'd follow and how he'd get into things and yeah. Now, did you know Daniel Agee?
No, I mean, you can say these names, and I may have known them, and I don't remember that name.
Well, he's the one that turned Loring and John on to macrobiotics, and he was a wild man, and he was. They were very close with him back in those early days when you knew him. But he was, I guess, he was after you, and he wasn't living in Berkeley. He was living in San Francisco. He was with the Zen Center. A true wild man.
Yeah, I know this one guy that was kind of wild, and that may be, I can't remember his name, so it may have been him who was, and I wrote this story about this guy who was, he was, he got into lotus. My problem was I couldn't do lotus posture, and that kind of put me off. But because of just my geometry and so on. Anyway, he this guy may have been the guy I'm thinking of who was, and I taught, this was in your book, which uh, who would, Suzuki went over to him once and said, "You smoke too much marijuana." And the guy said, uh, "Okay, I'll give it up. You're the boss." And Suzuki said, "No, you're the boss."
Oh no, that's not Daniel. I remember that story. I can't remember who it is right now. In fact, I don't know if I even say who it is.
The guy I'm
Did I
thinking
get
of,
that from you?
well, you may have, because I think I told it, and you may maybe put it in your book. I can't. I got the book.
Yeah, I don't remember now who it was, and maybe I didn't know who it was. Yeah, that's a really good exchange. I agree. Yeah, yeah. I'll quit. You're the boss. No, you're the boss.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It was like he was so. I mean, Suzuki was so. I mean, we met him on the bus once. Me and Loring were riding the Fillmore bus, and
yeah,
Suzuki got on, and he had his little pillbox hat, and he just
yeah.
smiled and waved at us. It was so, so funny to see that in a way, out of his context, maybe.
Yeah. Let me ask you. You're retired. You said. What are you retired from?
Well, I'm retired from being a handyman. I
Oh, is
was
that right?
I was kind of an independent contractor in Berkeley. Before that, I worked for an electronics firm, and I was an assembler.
Uh huh. Mm-hmm. Really? Wow. Wow. Well, I can see a picture of you, like maybe on your back porch in Mendocino. Very nice. It's very nice where you live.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
we have lots of trees.
yeah. Yeah. Where were you born?
I was born in Kansas City, Missouri.
Hmm.
And my
The city where everybody thinks it's in Kansas.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was more rural then, but of course, my parents were rurals. They came from the countryside. My father was a farmer, or he was a son of a farmer. And they had a long line of farmers, and uh,
Hmm.
my mother and my father both went to college, so that was,
Oh.
so then my father was a civil servant, and
Hmm.
he moved us around the country. I think it disorganized me, but you know,
Mm.
We used to live in Washington, D.C. Well, we lived in Washington, D.C. during the Second World War. And when I
Oh,
was in, first grade, second grade, the kids were all playing, war games, and somebody, it was
what year were you born?
1937.
No kidding. I had no idea. Wow. Wow. You're in good shape, man.
Well,
Hmm.
I try not to drink alcohol. I mean, when
Yeah.
I was younger, and I don't. It isn't like I'm, wouldn't. It just doesn't agree with me anymore. And I never had a lot of fun with it. I'll tell you. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, they say there are certain genetic types that are more, that are more susceptible to alcohol. I don't know.
That's right. That's true. I can tell
Yeah,
you, I know.
but a lot of these guys that I respect, I mean, I like Alan Watts. He was one of my gurus, really. I mean, I went to some
Yeah.
lectures. I don't mean we had a personal relationship, but he kind of was one that introduced Zen to everybody, to the
Yeah.
Eastern religions. And I thought he was, a very smart guy. And I liked him personally, though we didn't have much of a relationship. I did meet him,
Hmm.
and but he was alcoholic, and
Definitely.
and it, you know, but and Jan, he drank too much. I think Jan Willem van de Wetering was the Dutch guy who
Yeah.
wrote the Empty Mirror, and he wrote a whole bunch of mysteries. I like
Yeah.
his mysteries because he wrote these mysteries, and they were all had a lot of Zen in them, and they all took place in Amsterdam.
Mm. Yeah. He was wildly enthusiastic about Thank You and Okay. And then, but he said, you'll never be able to do a biography. It won't work. Other people have tried it. And then he was wildly enthusiastic about Cucumber. And he'd write me letters, like really good letters. And I'm not very good at that. And I think I disappointed him because I didn't have I didn't help keep a lively letter writing relationship going. But I really liked him and I liked what he wrote. I read some of his mysteries. They were good. Um, his last book, After Zen, did you see that?
Yeah, I got that. I liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting what happened to the. It was one guy that, I mean, he's a great storyteller, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. That's one of my, and he wrote about the guy that couldn't stop building. He built houses and sheds and everything, and he seemed really lonely. And he said, "Why not?" And Jan kept telling him, "Why don't you go down to the local bar and pick up some girl? There's all these nice middle-aged women who need a partner. But he could never. He had great stories. I mean, I like the storytelling. I don't know him personally, so I never. He might have been very abrasive, in person, but I liked
Hmm.
his stories.
Yeah. I missed him. He came out to California and I didn't get to meet him.
Too late now. So how are things there? It must be you're tropical and you're like a different time zone. You're like a whole different culture.
Yeah. It's nice here. We don't have all the issues they got in America, you know. Uh, People are pretty laid back. Now, they just passed a law here that you can go to jail for a year for having sex outside of marriage, uh, and that people who aren't married can't live together. opposite sex. And so that's not bad for homosexuals. But they also passed a law you can't slander the president and public officials. But I think they're just giving the fanatic Muslims, they have to give them stuff now and then to keep things going. And I don't think it'll matter much. I don't. In fact, they made it where only a family member can report the sex outside of marriage. So I don't think it's going to matter much. And tourists, it's supposed to apply to tourists too. Couple can't come here unless they're married. And
Well, I mean, do you live in Bali, or do you live like with Muslims?
yes, we live in Bali. Oh, I don't live with Muslims, but I'm around Muslims all the time. I have no problem with Muslims. Uh, my yoga teacher's a gorgeous Muslim woman, and we have wonderful talks. And she has like a Muslim guru. She says very interesting things. Um, and I go to Hindu ceremonies and stuff some. Basically, it all gets down to sort of, like you said, people believe things and stuff. Basically, they're animists, really. They make offerings to spirits. And same in Japan. Japanese, they're either atheist or animist, really. uh, uh, and but the term "run amok" comes from Indonesia, and so they there have been instances in their past where they've totally freaked out as a nation, but it's really nice now.
Uh-huh. Well, that's good. I
Yeah,
mean, I find there's something about American politics that's very fraught. But if you live like where we live here, we have kind of a village life, and people are not, they're not all. There's something about the media in America, and it's got worse. I mean, it used to be Walter Cronkite and, TV, and they'd, bring the new, but now you've got the internet, and you've got, uh, it's sort of like contagions which go through the internet. And because
yeah,
you don't, the unifying factor of having the three big networks and PBS, which kind of, in a way, that stabilized the country. But now you've got all kinds of websites, and they're big concerns. They have millions of followers, but they're all split, like with among different opinion groups, and they're like
right. That's right.
in a kind
Right.
of each one's a kind of orthodoxy from right to left,
Yeah,
and you can pick the one that you can agree with, but you don't hear the other side. It's like, just you hear the people that agree with you, and that's it.
yeah,
And and
yeah,
I tend to sort of back off from that. I mean, there's one thing that I really don't like, and that's the idea of like pushing kids into sex change operations. I mean, that's kind of a real evil that's been going on. I don't
yeah.
know if
That
you.
really, I don't understand that. That doesn't sound good, but it's probably things get blown up also by media and social media. They're always trying to rile people up because they make more money that way. So I imagine it's something that will pass. There's
I
always weird, creepy things happening.
I know, and the
Uh,
thing is that the kind of media we have there shoves it in your face, and the way
yeah,
the algorithms work, like, give
yeah,
us red meat, more red meat. And I was sort of looking for a dialogue with my peers, not, not all kinds of crazy sensationalism. I mean, in a way, I have a weird sense of humor. So, in a way, I dig the weird sensationalism because I sort of like, I'm also attracted to the grotesque because I think human life itself is in some way grotesque. And if people should get more into like well, their
I
own
hear
growth,
you.
and realize that they're not, nobody's normal.
That's right. That's great. That's great. I'm very sympathetic with what you said. Um, yeah. Yeah. I can definitely grok that. That's good.
Yeah, well, we read and science fiction too. We'll talk about that someday, uh, because that word is right from what's his name, the science fiction writer. Oh, I want you to meet Phoebe, though.
Oh
We
yeah.
can.
Hey Phoebe, come on over here. I want to see your disembodied ad.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Phoebe, is there Phoebe? You come and meet him.
Come on over, Phoebe.
That's all right. We'll all be in darkness. Oh, okay. I
All right. Where is she?
Hi, David. I'm in.
Phoebe. Oh, hi there. How are
Oh,
you?
thought there would be more light from the computer and from the. We have a light
oh
here,
God.
Oh, hi. Yeah, that's great. You look great. Phoebe, how'd you meet this guy?
I don't know. Was it at the cafe, the Mediterranean Cafe on Dwight Telegraph Avenue in the 60s, or was it riding my bike to work when I was a clerical worker at Cal in the early 60s and he rode by on his bicycle?
Yeah, he was.
Ah,
I knew her
Or
for. I knew her for 20 years before we
got
got
to.
together.
is that right? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Oh, and then he knew
Mm.
my sister.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I knew her.
So it's early days of Berkeley.
Yeah, yeah. You've known each other a long time since the mid '60s?
Yeah. Yep, since
Yeah.
around 62 or 63 or 64, we'd be on a demonstration against the war in Vietnam, and how everybody's waving their flags and marching, and Ken would be
Yeah.
marching by. Hi, Phoebe. Bye, Ken. Hi, Phoebe.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
we'd meet and during a demonstration. I knew her and she knew me, and we'd say, "Oh, hi, Phoebe," and all of a sudden this tear gas canister would come crashing down, at our feet, and we'd both run off and not see each other again for a couple of minutes.
But I guess we officially got together. Um, gosh,
Yeah, somewhere in the 80s,
yeah, right, the 80s.
late
Yeah,
80s,
yeah.
early 90s,
He
and
had
then
to
we.
fix the light bulb for me.
Yeah.
that's great. So, how long you been in Mendocino, Kent?
Oh, about 20 years,
We left
And
Berkeley.
and you too, Phoebe,
maybe it's
have you been
30.
here
Yeah,
20 years?
we came together up here. I had a
Oh,
little house on Hopkins Street, North
oh,
Street in Berkeley, and got together, I guess, in the 90s, the late 80s,
Yeah.
the late 80s. Yeah, we got
huh,
together. I went to
wow.
law school and clawed my way up the ladder to law school, and he was like my he'd take me walking to get me out of my head and into physical action.
Ah, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
We used to bike in the Berkeley Hills.
Yeah,
oh, wow. That's good. That's good. And are you a lawyer? Did you become a lawyer?
yeah, I actually did become a lawyer, and I'm actually now retired. With COVID,
Uh-huh.
I finally got to close the shop and say goodbye and now I'm just
Uh,
home.
what type of law did you do?
Well, I did everything. Originally, I wanted to be a labor lawyer for the pro workers, and I
Mm-hmm.
worked for CTA, the teachers union, for a while. As they have independent contractors, and when we moved up here, I was an independent contractor that represented teachers in Mendocino County.
Mm.
And then I did other, I did some, oh, I did special ed, and I
Mm-hmm.
represented either way, depending on who I was working for, either pro or con. And
Mm.
um, then I opened up a little practice. I had a building in Fort Bragg, and I just had my own
Oh.
practice and wills, trusts, and probate. And we originally started with a newsletter, and Ken did all the technical work when we first came up here, an
Mm-hmm.
education law newspaper. And
Mm.
Ken did all the layout and printing and the editing, copy editing.
How far is Fort Bragg from where you are?
Well, we're on the coast. We're like 3 miles,
From Fort
5 miles
Bragg?
from the city of Fort Bragg. We're in the unincorporated area.
Uh-huh. And how far are you from downtown Mendocino?
Around 10 miles.
Tim, I used to like, and I didn't do this a lot, but I've done it. Gone up and spent time in Mendocino half a dozen times. I like to go up to Fort Bragg and take that train that would go over to where? Where would it go over to? Willits,
Well,
Willits. I love that train. That's so much fun. I take it
yeah,
over there and take it back.
Yeah, the skunk
there,
train.
there was a
Ghost
cave
train?
in on the tunnel.
Skunk. They called it the skunk train.
Oh,
Yeah,
skunk
skunk.
train, skunk train. Yeah.
We don't know why. That's
There was a cave in on the tunnel, and they haven't been able to repair it. So the skunk train goes halfway to Willits and turns around and comes back. Now,
Oh,
and it's become gentrified, and now there's a wine and cheese bar and all this stuff that there wasn't when you were going on it.
oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Ha ha ha. That's great. Well, that's a nice area. I really like it a lot up there. Yeah. Hmm.
So is my
So,
close up? Yeah. Is it over?
yeah,
well, we
there's no plan.
Well, there's a story Ken tells that I really like. Tell him about Bacchus and Philomena.
oh yeah,
The myth.
Hey, yeah, stay here and you can give him cues. Hey, tell about this, tell about that. That's good. All right.
Tell that story,
it's a
Ken.
one of the Greek myths. One of the Greek myths which doesn't end in death and bloodshed.
Uh
Well,
huh.
tell him the story. Tell him the
Oh
What
story.
is
yeah,
it?
it's this couple,
Oh,
this
you don't know?
nice old couple called Bacchus and Philemon, and the Greek gods, they're very frugal and they're very friendly. They're very good to people that are, they uh, embodied the quality of hospitality, which the gods really like. So the gods decide they want to, test them and see how they're doing. So I think it was Apollo and Hermes, and they change themselves into humans, like
Mm-hmm.
travelers sort of down on their luck, and they come to the house and they knock on the door and they say, like, well, we're poor ragged travelers, can you help us? And they say, come on in, you and they have a bottle of wine, and they have I don't know, some leg of lamb or something. It's not much, but they say, we got it. You can have, take what you want, and the travelers, they come in and uh, there's hardly enough to go around, but suddenly the wine keeps filling up. It's like there's always
Uh-huh.
wine in the jug, and there's
Uh-huh.
always food on the table, and they have a big feast, and then the gods reveal themselves, and they say, "You guys are really, nice people, and so we're going to give you." And I think they give them, like kind of a mansion, or
No,
I
it
forgot
was the
exactly.
food. It was the food. There's an unlimited supply of
Oh
food,
yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
they stay in their
What? They
local.
gave him what?
They stayed in their cottage, but they had an unlimited supply of food. They never ran out. They were never hungry.
Oh, well,
Anyway,
that's very nice.
Yeah.
yeah. But I really love the Greek myths, and you know,
That is a Greek story that doesn't end in death
yeah.
Right.
and
It's
bloodshed. Very nice. All right, what else? What else you got in your sleeve?
Oh, I don't know. No, I meant, it's whatever you see. Just like that Zen story. I mean, I know you must know it. There's a Zen student goes up to a Zen master, and he's been frustrated for a long time because somehow, like he's done all the meditations and the recitations and so on, and he says, I don't get it, you know, and he thinks, you must be withholding something from me. I mean, you're not really giving me the real teaching. We're just doing these exercises. And the Zen master takes him out and, out in the countryside, and he says, "Well, do you feel the wind on your face?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, do you see the trees? Do you hear the water running in the creek?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I hear it." And the Zen master says, "Well, what have I hidden from you?"
Yeah, that's good. Now, I don't know that story. I really like it.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I have a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. That's
Oh,
where I
is
got
that
a
from
lot.
Simplest? Well, then I've read it, but a long time ago. Love that book. That book came out in like 58 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Reps. We got to meet him. He hung out at Zen Center and some wonderful guy, like a sort of pixie. He was very cherubic and very neat. He painted a couple of walls at Green Gulch in the student dorm area. What, like bright yellow, the whole thing, and then I think one was yes and the other was no or something. And I'm I would assume they're painted over now, and they should have been preserved as treasures of the Zen Center. But anyway, I I didn't have a choice in that. And he got Zen Center into fat pants, where like Chinese pants, that are really open. And there was this whole period there, like late 70s, early 80s or something, uh, or maybe just late 70s, where everybody was wearing fat pants, and it was very comfortable. And Elias Stitchery was making them and selling them. Paul Reps, he was great. Great. Everybody liked Paul Reps. And he was a student of Nyogen Shinzaki. And the book, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, I think is Reps with Shinzaki and stories he learned from Shinzaki.
So it's
So,
getting to be about an hour.
well, I guess we should wrap it up. Do you have any, well, first, Phoebe, do you have any final comments?
uh, at the beginning of my growth, which wasn't following the Zen path necessarily, a friend died, which is when we were just in our early years at college or at 18, 17 or 18. And
Hmm.
somebody died, and we were all at his house in his room. He died in an automobile accident with other
Hmm.
people in it. he died. So we all went to his room to sort of say goodbye. And I wrote without really consciousness. I didn't know what to say. And I wrote, and I hope I can remember it, je n'ai pas de mots. Anyway, it's in French. I don't have any words. And that's what I would say. Only I'd have to check my French to make sure I had the words right. Je n'ai pas de mots.
And what does that mean?
I don't have any words. And I was only 18 or 19 when I wrote that. And
that's what Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki's son, said to me when I called him up. I was living in Japan then and told him that Dainin Katagiri had died, the priest that helped Suzuki at Zen Center. And he said, in Japanese, he said, I don't have any words. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Excellent.
But he's the boy. He's
Yeah,
the guy. He's the
one
guy.
of the
He's a special.
Yeah, he is.
And I just wrote this quote, like on my notes. And I can't remember who the guy was. He was one of the Indian scholars and gurus who was like in the 1950s. And I'm not sure if it was Sri Aurobindo or one of those guys. And somebody once asked him, which is faster, the tantric way or the regular way of meditation, which is the fastest way to enlightenment? And the guy said, oh, the tantric way is much quicker, but no respectable person would do it.
I wonder. Yogananda, could have been Yogananda.
Yeah, I don't think it was Yogananda, but it could have been.
Sri Aurobindo or Ramana Maharshi. He died in 1950. So,
well, Ramana Maharshi is an interesting guy because I think he was, I think he was another one of the real guys.
Oh, yeah. I spent time at his ashram just 11 years ago. Spent 4 months there. Living near a few minutes from it. I loved it there. It was wonderful. I have great respect for him. Yeah. I have only known you for several decades now through email and Facebook Messenger, fairly brief exchanges. And I have read, you and Loring would get into these discussions.
I got a pile of Loring's letters that he wrote me.
Yeah. Now, are these letters written in longhand?
Yeah. He was trying to do italic handwriting. And it was funny because he did a lot of italic handwriting and he never got it.
But he did. He was real good at italic handwriting.
Yeah.
Ken.
Would you tell me what are you saying?
I interrupted. I'm sorry about that. But I was saying that Ken was very good at italic handwriting, at calligraphy.
Italic handwriting?
Yeah, it's
calligraphy.
Calligraphy. Calligraphy. Oh, okay. I just didn't understand what you were saying there.
And Lorraine was writing in that style also to Ken in the letters.
Oh, yeah. Well, Lorraine would be following some guru or following some conspiracy theory or something. Ken said he could be very literal. Yeah, he had a tendency to believe things, which is dangerous.
Well, we got into it. He was in this Occupy Wall Street. He got real excited about Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a grassroots, we don't like this hyper organization of all the finances. I mean, they had a point, I think, but they got sort of off the rails. And what Loring was doing was he was going around about how all the bankers, they're the wicked people, the evil people, bankers, the money people,
Yeah,
sort of like I keep telling him, they're from the Buddhist point of view, they're all, suffering beings. They're not, we don't like get obsessed with their social roles.
that's well said. That's well said. Also, even talking about it politically or in the, mundane way, um, things I think are much better approached by looking at it saying, well, maybe it's a little out of balance. Not just we got to get rid of this other thing. I mean, so a lot of things we tend, especially as you pointed out early on, where we're like really super polarized. Whereas sometimes just, tweaking things some or not taking it so seriously and, come to some compromise or whatever. A lot of societies, more primitive societies, are run on consensus and coming together, you know. But we're into tribalism now so much. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, we don't identify with any tribe, and that's our problem. You're kind of lonely when you're not part of the tribe. We love it, but it's
I, I I hear you. I don't really, I just feel like, well, I'm a uh, human being living on Earth, and I'm sort of sympathetic to other human beings, and of course, I feel uh, a loyalty to where I came from and who I came from and all that, and we always care more about what is close to us. But God, in Buddhism, it doesn't. It's all beings. It's not just human beings. It's
yeah,
all
exactly,
beings. You know.
exactly. I mean, these. That's what really irritates me about the Christians is uh, they're so concerned about the little fetus, but they're not. But what about all those animals? The animals are sentient. They may not speak language, but they're almost there. You know, if
Yeah.
you have a relationship with
Yeah.
an animal, you know that.
Yeah.
We have ravens here. Ravens are the smartest of all birds, and they. Uh, we have relationships with the ravens.
A raven once landed. We were with my prayer wife Elin. We were living in Santa Fe, and a raven landed in the backyard and just said hello to her
Oh,
so
wow.
clearly, and flew off. And yeah, their intelligence has been shown definitely. Uh, wow. Mm.
Well,
Uh,
let's wind it down because it's way past our bedtime.
I
It's
understand.
it's 8:15 here. I
No, it's 8:15. All right. Yeah. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, nice meeting you, Phoebe.
I liked your book.
Oh, thank you. You have very good taste. I
well,
No, I
appreciate.
we have your books up
yeah,
there in
yeah.
the
No,
bookshelf.
I really did like the first one. Thank you, I'm
Mm.
okay, or whatever.
Thank you,
No.
and okay.
Thank you and okay. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Oh, thank you. Thank
And
you.
crooked
I'm
cucumber.
All right, Crooked
yeah.
Tooth.
I'm working on a book called Tassajara Stories now, but
Oh,
I don't think I can match those other two books, but it'll be something. I have to finish it. Uh,
did you know Del Carlson? Del
very
Carlson.
well. I helped spread his ashes here in Bali.
Oh, well, he was my high school art teacher.
Oh, is that right? Did you happen to know a guy named Eric Kaljo? Eric lives here,
Uh-huh.
and Dell was his high school English teacher.
Art.
Eric is like Ethiopia. No, but like not Ethiopia. Like near Finland. What are those little countries? Estonia. He might be Estonian,
Huh.
or Estonian background. But Dell was his high school teacher. Well, what do you remember about Dell? Just tell us real quick.
Oh, Dale Carlson saved my life. And there was somebody called Margaret Johnson, not literally, but we had a group, a youth group that Margaret Johnson, who was another art teacher in in Palo Alto, and Dale, I couldn't begin to talk about him right now, except he's wonderful. And
Well, would you
when
write me something about Dell?
I'll try to, I'll try to, I'll see if I can.
Uh,
But I know somebody that kept in touch with him, and when he moved out until his death, he
mhm.
wherever that was in the Midwest or wherever he went,
No, Florida.
Florida. Well, it's all my memory, deep memory is of the high school, and he
Yeah.
was
Uh,
amazing.
what high school?
It doesn't exist anymore. It's called Cubberley High School, Elwood P. Cubberley High School in Palo Alto. They shut it down and turned it into a senior center and made a fancier high school somewhere else.
Ah, ah.
But if I have a yearbook picture of him, maybe we can scan it and send it to you if that's of any use.
I have a page. I have a great deal about Dell on my main website, cuke.com.
Oh, I'll look.
Just write Dale Carlson on the site search box,
Okay.
and links will come up for him. Yeah, I got art of his, and
Oh yeah.
you
Oh, and
know.
his grandmother was named Phoebe, I think,
Oh,
and he
really?
pat me on the head, or not literally, but because but he would tell me that his grandmother was named Phoebe. Was he?
Oh, that's great. Well, he would come
Yeah.
to Tasahara every summer.
Well, that's what clicked on me because I remember I learned about that later. He was totally involved in Tassajara. Maybe I read it in your book. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
learned that.
yeah. He and I would whenever he came. Dell was a bit grumpy and stuff.
Yeah,
He'd come. He liked it there because he was gay. I mean, he told me this, and he
yeah,
felt
yeah. We
very
kind of knew that.
comfortable in Zen Center, being gay.
Uh-huh,
Nobody cared, or
right,
although he certainly didn't make a thing out of it. He
right.
was pre-gay pride, uh,
Yeah,
and
right.
although I'm not, he was happy for gay pride because then he didn't have to, you
Yeah.
know, keep it a secret or whatever. Didn't ever seem to be a issue with him. Uh, but every summer he'd come to Tassajara, and we would have a tea and talk. What's been up and this and that, and that was always nice. I was a little loud for him, and unruly.
Well,
Uh,
he knew a lot of kids. I mean, he
yeah,
took care of a lot of kids. So I'm sure it was okay.
yeah, yeah. But he hung out with a guy named Isan Tommy Dorsey, who's like the most famous gay Zen teacher. Very interesting guy who studied with Suzuki. And I was in touch with him toward the end. And then when he died, his niece, Nancy, I think, she asked if I knew who Eric was.
Mm.
And I said no. She said, well, he and his partner live in Bali. So I got in touch with them, and we've been close ever since. They live in a beautiful villa in this, terraced rice field area, and I live in the city.
Oh, I thought he'd moved to the Midwest. I didn't know he'd
No,
gone to Bali.
no, Dell moved to Florida.
Yeah, that's
I,
right.
I think it was
Yeah,
Sarasota. You
yeah,
know, it'll say on the page about him. And he
right.
was into horses. He was into horses, like, I don't know what type. Maybe it'll say.
I'll
Uh,
look.
and there's other things. It'll tell you other things about him I don't want to get into.
Yeah,
you know.
that's fine. He's actually sent me a card when we were up here because the person I knew was another high school student of his in the day, and George Eby told him about they'd found me where I was, and Dale wrote me a card, and I had no idea of all this stuff until I read your book or read about it. I mean, it
Mm,
blew my mind. To me, he was just my high school art teacher.
mm. All right, bedtime, bedtime. Very
Yeah,
good talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Great.
And until we
we'll be
meet
in.
again,
Nice to
Oh,
meet you.
yes.
Bye
nice to
bye.
meet you. So thank you very much, Ken Spiker. That was great. Thanks a lot. Good to talk to you. And, oh, I can't remember your friend's name. I'd have to go back and listen. My apologies, ma'am. Fun talking to you, too. Had neat to hear that you studied with Dale Carlson in high school. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur, Windoga Bandita, Vilan Guchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.